Welcome to the Urbanist Agenda. I am Jason from Not Just Bikes, and I'm joined today by the three members of the Urban Truth Collective. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hello.
So before we get started, I think I should introduce each one of you. Maybe we can get started with you, Brent. I know you've been on the show before, but just introduce yourself briefly, and then after that, we'll talk about what the Urban Truth Collective is and what you're planning on doing with it.
Sure. I'm the city planning practitioner in this super team up. I've been a city planner and urbanist for 34 years. Former chief planner of Vancouver, worked in and now international, working in cities all over the world, as we had a great chat about before, Jason.
Yeah.
And I've got an agenda. I've got my own agenda, which is to try to change the city planning profession from within. And that takes a lot of interesting directions. But one of the real obsessions is to change the approach to communication. Because as we talked about on the last time I was on the show, the city planning profession can take this inherently cool and sexy thing, cities, and make them mind-numbingly boring. Our communication is just way too boring, and thus not as nearly as persuasive as it should be. So, I'm a city planner who's obsessed with communication, and that's my part of the Venn diagram of our overlap, the three of us.
Right. Okay. And we've also got a couple of other people here. Tom, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah. So I'm a parent of two now teen boys, which is wild just to think, but I come from advertising. I worked agency side for a whole number of years in Toronto, including doing some work on automotive manufacturers, and things kind of pivoted for me. And now I've got an agency called Rovelo Creative, where I just kind of do some work with strategy, creative and content, trying to reframe the mainstream narrative around road safety, road violence, and active transportation.
Very good. And Grant?
I'm Grant Dennis, and I'm the author of a book called Dark PR, How Corporate Disinformation Undermines Our Health and Environment. And I wrote that book from a career in humanitarian affairs, where I was working in Iraq and doing work with NGOs in Syria. And I saw Russian disinformation attacking the aid worker community in Iraq and in the Middle East. And then I moved on to work in public health, and I got to see how big tobacco worked.
Right.
So I wrote this book about, from one hand, it's urbanist disinformation. It's also disinformation about nutrition and disinformation about fossil fuels. And so I have a little bit more of an academic angle to the Urban Truth Collective.
Very good. And so the three of you have come together to create this Urban Truth Collective, which is something you just launched, I think it was just a couple of months ago. So tell us a little bit about, what is the Urban Truth Collective?
It's even newer than that, Jason. I think we're a month in, really, about a little more than a month in. But boy, have we hit the ground running, and we're building the plane as we're flying it. What other metaphors can I possibly think of here? The last time I was on your show, we were working on this, and I couldn't talk about it. It was kind of killing me that I couldn't talk about it.
Right.
But everything we talked about on your last episode about the need to break through the noise, tell the truth more persuasively, and aggressively and fearlessly call out the lies and disinformation and the liars. We talked about that, and that's been my obsession for at least the last 5, maybe even 10 years of my career. I've sort of said, we don't need new ideas in city building. We need to communicate the obvious ideas better and, frankly, be more successful in achieving them. And so with this obsession rattling around in my brain, I'm observing Tom, who's this unicorn marketing guy who's talking about all the issues that the three of us are passionate about, but he's putting the marketing lens on them all, and that's completely different and super effective. And I'm somewhat obsessed with marketing, so I sort of fell in love with Tom. And Grant writes the most persuasive book and the most important book in this subject matter, I think, that's been written. And so the three of us are talking, and I'm working this thing out in my head, are we all just going to keep being individuals doing our part and maybe helping each other out? Or is there a team up here? And what would the team up be? So I came up with a pitch and pitched it to them. The first thing we did was reject my original name, and the three of us workshop a name.
That's why you needed the marketing guy in there.
Yeah, boy. Get 3 creative people to debate the words in a name, and you'll have some fun.
It's like, can you guys talk to the traffic engineers who think that the name road diet is a good idea? Who has ever thought that a diet is something that is fun or good. I mean, it's good in the long run, but like, it just sounds so awful.
Guaranteed Grant has opinions on that one. But that's the thing. So I pitched it to them. I was worried they'd say we're too busy or we don't like the idea.
Yeah.
But we are all too busy, but they love the idea. So suddenly we're trying to do this off the side of our very busy desks. We're very aware of the fact that we're three white guys starting this. But as we said from the beginning, it was designed to grow. We've already added collaborators from around the world. And so the diversity, the perspectives, the skill sets, everything is built to grow and is growing as we speak. And that's really exciting. So that's sort of how we started.
So the main goal of this then is to push back against a lot of the misinformation that's going around about cities and urban design. And is that right? Is that like the key, the core of it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, one of the things we're working on right now is how the 15-minute city conspiracy came to be.
Yeah.
And we've been saying internally, and we're looking to see what we can do about it to maybe reframe that debate as, but what about the 1 hour conspiracy?
Right.
Where we're all trapped in these horrible cities where we have to drive everywhere.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The 15-minute cities thing, that was actually the first episode on this podcast. I talked about it with Adam something. And that DSMOG article that I'll link in the show notes we talked about as well, where they did the investigation into it. When it was very frustrating because it was really started by a bunch of climate change denialists. And it seems like cities got caught in the crosshairs. Like it had nothing to do with cities. It was that they were trying a bunch of different things. And cities was the one that stuck. The 15-minute city was the one that stuck, which is just so frustrating because it's like, I am open to valid criticisms. I'm not open to climate change denialism that's just trying the shotgun method of conspiracy posting and managed to hit cities. That just pisses me off. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, it is refreshing to see that, to be honest, some pushback to that because it's ludicrous.
Well, we're going to do more than some. And people have asked us, how are you different? Are you different? I've been part of team-ups of urbanists. You know, urbanists come together to talk more about good urban ideas. This is not that. This is communication focused. It's marketing, it's branding, it's persuasiveness, it's messaging, it's word choice, but we're not going to be word police. And so it's very much leading with the communication side. Like these two guys come to the subject matter of urbanism from communication.
Right.
I come to communication from the subject matter of urbanism. We meet in the middle with different, very different, dramatically different skill sets. And I emphasize that because people have said, how can we get involved? And who do you want to get involved? And we don't want to just create a clubhouse, another clubhouse for urbanists.
Right.
We're looking for people and collaborators with ideas and skill sets around the messaging, the marketing, the communication, and how to successfully break through the noise. And we've got really high expectations for ourselves. We're all busy people who are already doing great work. Why would we form this if we didn't think it could fundamentally change things and have a real powerful impact?
And I imagine some of that has also got to be that you're not so much doing a club of people, like you said, that will work together on something. You're also putting out material that could be used by anybody, really. They don't have to get your permission to come along and use some of the ideas that you've come up with.
Absolutely. Tom, why don't you jump in there?
Yeah, no, that's for sure. I think one of the biggest things for me is that Brent's already touched on it, but my background is I come at this from being a parent. That was my entry point into this kind of world, which I still feel like a fish out of water in this space, to be perfectly honest. And having that kind of awakening to the imbalance on the streets just through the parental lens of trying to move kids through the city is what kind of shook me and had that moment of clarity. And for me, the work here is trying to highlight for people that haven't had that moment of clarity, kind of this sleeping middle ground who just haven't been awoken to the imbalance that's been completely normalized on our streets. And that's kind of how I think about things and how I try to frame things up, generally speaking, with these audiences, because it's how I would like it framed up to me, because I don't speak transportation planning, urbanism to a certain extent. I think of things as a parent and what's in it for me as just a regular human trying to get through the chaos of life.
Yeah, you know, the parenting angle is one that I've talked about before on Not Just Bikes. I don't know how much of my audience are parents, though, because they're a little bit on the younger side, but they're getting up there, actually. But that was something I noticed as well, is that my opinions on all of this changed drastically as soon as I had kids. And I still, you know, in the early days of the channel, I would get pushback from people saying like, oh, come on, you say Toronto or whatever is so bad. It's not that bad. I bike it every day. And I'm like, ah, dude, but you're also like 25 and male and fit. And like the first time you try to go out there, not even with your kids cycling, but with your kids on the bike on the
Yeah.
back, it suddenly changes everything. Because like I remember one time I was cycling along the Danforth west towards the bridge, the viaduct, and this guy comes in a car and just like speeds past us and actually clipped my handlebars. And I almost fell. I caught the bike, almost fell. And my son was on the back. He was like, I don't know, at the time he was probably 2 years old. And I was like, holy shit, that was scary. And then, of course, I get myself back together, get on the bike, start cycling again at a slow pace. And I catch up to the asshole right at the traffic lights. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck did we just do right there, right? Like you could have seriously injured my kid. So what? So that you could get to the traffic light a couple seconds faster? And that was one of those things that like before I had kids, I would have been pissed off about it. But after I had kids, I was like fucking done with it. Like absolutely fucking done with it.
Yeah, that's exactly my experience, Jason, was being kind of mid-20s, advertising guy, biking around, just living the life.
Yeah.
Like there was dangers, but I never really processed it in the way that I did as soon as I took those kids out.
Yeah.
And yeah, for me, it was like, oh, this is really shit to get around. And then the idea of people framing up myself and others who were trying to make simple changes to get some kids moved around the city as radicals is what kind of set a fire for me and kind of is still what motivates me to this day, because it's not radical to want people to move safely through a city.
Of course not. And I think actually designing cities for kids is like the right way to design it. For like first thing you should consider is how to design it for kids. And it gets easier for everyone else after that.
Can I jump in and say this? It would be very easy for people looking at our work to assume we're going to focus almost entirely on what we're talking about right now. And here we are with Jason from Not Just Bikes and Grant, who's, by the way, everybody should read Dark PR. Everybody should read that book, seriously.
I'll leave a link in the show notes.
It will change your perspective. Grant and I debate about things in it all the time, but that doesn't mean it hasn't fundamentally changed my way of looking at things. Tom got into the urbanist sphere through the road violence kind of driver harm kind of area. And some people actually think I'm a specialist in transportation, which I'm not, just because I like to talk about it. I'm a generalist urbanist. I like everything about cities. So it'd be very easy to think that this new collective is going to be specifically about that. One of the very first posters we put out was about homelessness. And the poster said basically, if you aren't building homes to solve homelessness, you aren't interested in solving homelessness. That was the tagline. And we put that out right away early to make the point that everything is in play. Everything is fair game when it comes to better cities for people. And I think that's important to stress, because I don't want anyone to think, if they're not interested in the streets and issue, that there isn't something here for them. We're all in this together on all the interconnecting elements of better cities. And the thing I love about cities is how incredibly multifaceted and complex they are. Even though we try to communicate them simply, they are staggeringly complex. And we're going to try to embrace all that. And it's going to be a challenge for us, because we all like talking about what we're talking about now. But I thought it was useful to make that point. And Tom and I right now are actually in the process of making a list of all the other subject matters we want to hit, lest we fall easily into that trap of talking most about streets.
I think that's perfectly valid, because that is the majority of the conversation in urban circles online, for sure. It's about the street side of things. And, housing comes in. But even I find when people talk about housing online, they talk about it like in the context of zoning. Like it's like in the context of minimum parking requirements. And I'm like, yeah, that is an element. But at the same time, there's a housing crisis in almost every single city in the Western world. And not all of them have those same issues with zoning and minimum parking requirements either. And homelessness increased substantially after COVID, and the streets didn't change to make that happen, So I'm curious to know, for this program that you're putting together, what kind of content are you putting out? I mean, I've seen that you've put out some things on Blue Sky. What's it going to look like?
Well, I'll start and you guys jump in. First of all, we're active, very active on Blue Sky. We hope everyone who's listening takes part in that. I think it's the place where the best urbanist community is right now. And Jason, I also love Mastodon too, and I know you're big there.
That's all right. That's where the Europeans are.
But I think, we probably should open a Mastodon account. But right now we're linked so that I think the Mastodon folks are getting our content through Blue Sky.
Yeah.
Instagram and LinkedIn are our others. Jason, I know you and I have had the debate about, or not the debate, the conversation about what about the elephant in the room, which is X/Twitter. Can you have a conversation about disinformation and want to call out the liars if you're not on X? We've had this discussion, but the other side of it is you're feeding the trolls and strengthening the Nazis by being on there at all. It's kind of like, if you want to change American politics, do you go on Fox News or not?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that kind of debate. We're not on there yet, but we're still challenging ourselves to think, some people have said, how do you claim you're going to make a dent on disinformation if you're not engaging in the cesspool of disinformation?
Yeah.
Which is X.
I think it's a fair conversation, and we can maybe talk about it separately. But my biggest issue with X is obviously there's the Nazis, the whole Nazi bar thing. But my biggest issue with X in terms of this is that it is overwhelmed by bots. Like, I know that everyone talks dead internet theory. They talk about bots. There are bots on Instagram. There are bots on YouTube. There are bots on Facebook. There are a hell of a lot of bots on X. And I think this is part of the issue, that it's overwhelmingly just flooded by bots with the premium check. And so I don't know if it's even like, first of all, I don't know if it's possible to communicate when there are so many bots on there that will flood everything you do. But the second thing is, I don't actually know how many actual people you're communicating with versus bots or somebody in Pakistan who's trying to make a little bit of money by posting stuff to X with their blue check.
Yeah. Plus, the algorithm is constantly suppressing your content if you talk about things Elon doesn't like.
But I actually think that platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and even LinkedIn are actually like genuinely good platforms for reaching real people. And I think it is interesting that you said LinkedIn, because I don't use LinkedIn anymore because of what I do. And boy, I was very involved in LinkedIn for a while. But like, I remember when I was first doing some of the urbanist stuff and my stuff would get posted to LinkedIn, the amount of like misunderstanding of things was like pretty strong on LinkedIn, because it was your typical like corporate person who never thinks about this, who drives to work and just, it's totally out of their mind. And so when they're presented with it, they like don't even know what to do with that information. And I think in some ways, those are people that would be better to reach for this stuff, as opposed to the people who are actively participating on the Nazi site on a day-to-day basis. I think it would actually be better to go one level up to those people who maybe all they've heard about cities are these loud people and these people who run bots and these people who are financed by some very wealthy individuals. That's all they've heard because they've never had a chance to intersect with it in any other way.
Yep. So that's why we're on the sites that we're on right now. And I did want to put out there that we're thinking about it and we're challenging our own preconceptions. To talk about the content, we're putting out a lot of messages. We're taking existing messages. We're gathering up the low-hanging fruit, because part of our thing is to tell the truth more persuasively and to reach broader audiences and break through the noise. So we don't have to create all new truths, for God's sake. There's a ton of great truth out there that just needs more persuasive sharing. But we are creating our original content, and the posters that we're putting out that you've seen are a big part of that. Tom is the whiz at the graphics of that, and I'll stop in a second and let him speak to those posters and messages. And then we're doing the original content and the big campaigns, and we're launching now our first one, and Grant can talk about that.
All right, Tom. So tell us a little bit about like the posters and some of the marketing material, what form that's taking and how you see that being used by other people.
Yeah, I think how it works with us here is that we're very lucky to have Brent and Grant, who have a real wealth of knowledge in this space. And kind of my role in this is to take some of that wealth of knowledge and translate it for what I, again, consider this more mainstream audience that might not understand or have had their moments or seen things. So to frame it up in a way that they can connect with and understand a little bit better. And as I always say, I use myself as that target audience. How would a message resonate with me as this regular person? So it's about taking a lot of the ideas and knowledge and really, translating it into ways that people can connect to and understand with. And Ideally doing things like we've done with consumer products for forever, connecting with people emotionally, things that they can relate to, all the things we've done for products forever, and kind of applying that to this urbanist transportation, city planning kind of space. That's the general idea.
So in some ways, this will be taking truths that we might, urbanists might all know, but then packaging it up in a way that like is catchy, which is
Correct.
something like I'm familiar with not just bikes. There's lots of things that I've taken where,
For sure.
you can state the same thing 100 times and nobody cares, but then you make it kind of catchy and suddenly everyone's repeating it. And that's a big part of it.
Exactly.
Catchy and repeating it are two key words. Repetition, repetition, repetition is a big part of our work. Some examples, Tom, tell me if you think there's important ones we've missed. So we put out a poster that shows a car crash and it puts in quotes, speed wasn't a factor. We all are frustrated by that message from the media and the police who say because they weren't technically speeding, speed was not a factor.
Or because they didn't have proof of it with a radar or something, speed wasn't a factor. They may have very well been speeding too. But even if they're not.
But that's the thing. The line at the bottom says speed is always a factor.
Right.
Because it's a factor in whether the crash happened at all, and it's a factor with whether or not it's a big factor with whether people died or were injured.
Yeah.
So speed is always a factor. So you're taking the bad message and you're reframing it, which is something Grant is so good at, right? So that's an example. We've got one with a walkable neighborhood with stuff right there, and it uses the quote that I took from early on in the 15-minute city debate. It says, wait, we're afraid of walkable distances now?
Right.
Where we're just trying to make the point of how much lunacy, how insane it is that they're even suggesting that we should be afraid about having more options in our community nearby without being car dependent, right? So in each case, we're constantly trying to work out how to tell the truth, but also, as we said, we want to go after the lies and reframe them or take back the words that have been stolen, like truth and common sense.
Yeah.
We even debated whether we should have truth in the title of the organization because Trump had kind of ruined the word truth with Truth Social. And we said, well, screw that. We're not letting them steal these normal words. We're taking them back.
And freedom is another one, too. People always talk about like, oh, I need my car for freedom. I'm like, what are you, is this a car commercial or something?
Absolutely.
Like, what about the freedom to not to have to drive, right? Like,
perfect.
Which is one that I repeat quite often in my videos.
Yep.
So do you see these, like, obviously there's a lot of videos and images that you're sharing across social media, and hopefully those will get shared by other people and get conversations started. Are there going to be like physical products as well, posters, stickers, that kind of stuff? Or is this sort of left as an exercise to the reader?
Tom?
Well, we'll see how that goes. I think this is step one right now.
Fair enough.
And I think, Jason, as you know so well, too, like a lot of these things that, we've heard thousands of times or understand so clearly, there's such a large audience that still doesn't connect to some of those really basic principles or ideas.
Yeah.
And just to jump on what Brent was saying, that's why the repetition and the messages that seem obvious to us, as you know very well, are not obvious necessarily to everybody else that we're hoping to reach. But as far as posters and t-shirts, I don't know. We'll see.
Well, the one thing that I've seen work fairly well is stickers, like when the War on Cars did stickers, and I've done stickers in the past. What also works surprisingly well is just having designs that are well made and that are clever and letting other people go and do that. And it actually was amazing to me that when I shut down my merch shop because it was just too expensive to run for razor thin margins, there were a bunch of people that like created their own stickers based on the designs that I had done. And people were like, oh, I saw this like on a traffic post in Vancouver or something. And that was quite funny. But another side of that you brought up there, Tom, is that among urbanists, there's a lot of these kind of like in jokes and there's these things we understand intuitively. I mean, even if you say, so what, we're afraid of walkable distances now, to like the average person, they're like, I don't even know what that means. Like, they don't even compute. So we also have to be careful to bring it up to a level where like, you don't even need to have watched a Not Just Bikes video or whatever to understand what's going on here.
So, Jason, your example is, I think, a perfect one that we would talk about. What about the freedom to not have to drive everywhere?
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of a reframing of their successful argument that cars equal freedom. But we ask ourselves, okay, would a normal person who doesn't do what we do all day, every day, go, yeah, that's a good point? Or would they go, I don't know what that means? That's exactly the kind of conversation. So it's a good chance to jump into a next good example, because that's what our first campaign is about. It's taking an existing conspiracy bullshit situation and turning it on its head deliberately and overtly. Grant, why don't you talk about our first campaign?
Yeah, so rather than try and debunk the 15-minute city conspiracies, we want to kind of pivot and go past that to say that we should be organizing against the 1 hour city. That the real conspiracy is that our cities have been rigged so that we can't walk in them. We can't just like go and bike to get the stuff that we need every day.
You can't even buy a bag of milk.
You can't even buy a bag of milk. I mean, if you look at the 15-minute city, there's a lot of good debunking that could be done. I mean, we've started to follow the money a little bit. And you've got the John Birch Society, the Tea Party, the Koch brothers.
Yep.
These really like famous, we're using this term a lot now, tinfoil hat idiots that are behind a lot of this stuff, and big money's behind it. But that's not really the approach you want to take when you really want to see policy change happen.
Right.
You have to find a way to be going right after what you want. And really, to achieve a 15-minute city, you need to get rid of all of these laws that are preventing them. I mean, you mentioned that we do always talk about zoning quite a lot, but you have a lot of countries that don't even have zoning that are still seeing this problem.
Yeah.
It could be subsidies for petrol at the pump. It could be all kinds of different stuff. But whatever these things are, these policies are all forcing us into 1 hour cities. And I think that's a good approach to take. We're preparing some good campaign materials around that. And I think, fight the 1 hour city isn't so bad. We'll see where it resonates. We're going to test. I mean, if the listeners like it, maybe they could share this episode and let us know. But it's something that's worth trying. Tom or Brent, do you have anything more you wanted to add?
So we're thinking about how we'd launch that. So they've manufactured this fake conspiracy in the 15-minute city. They took something that's as simple as having more stuff nearby, where, as Tom likes to say, you can send your kid to go get the milk. You don't even have to get off the couch yourself. And they've made it into this gulag, Hunger Games kind of insanity, when the real conspiracy was right under their nose the whole time, which, that's going to be one of our first teasers. Turns out the real conspiracy was right under your nose the whole time.
Yeah.
Which is the 1 hour city, where there actually is a conspiracy. It sounds like a dramatic word, but there are powerful, wealthy forces working together to make a lot of money off you driving more and having to drive more with no other choice, right? So there really is at least a collaboration, if not a conspiracy, that is doing that. And the conspiracy nuts aren't talking about that conspiracy, which is a real one. So it's Grant's idea. He gets credit for it. It's brilliant. But it perfectly illustrates what we want to do. We want to take something out there that's a lie and not just say, that's a lie, because here are the facts. You and I have talked about this, Jason. There's a reason why there's lines like, if you're explaining, you're losing in politics, or the lie goes around the world before the truth puts on his pants in the morning, or however that.
I think it was ties up its shoes, but
ties up his shoes. There you go.
It's been various forms over the decades.
There's a reason those sayings exist. It's because they're true. And so what's your line, Grant? You can't just debunk, because debunking doesn't work. You've got to reframe. You've got to fundamentally reframe the perception and make people go, oh, yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. So we're constantly looking for that reaction. And the point of these big campaigns, as opposed to our small, quick hit posters, which we've done a lot, your listeners should go to our website, www.urbantruthcollective.com. We've got all the posters we've been doing. I think we're up to 14 or 15 of them. We want you to print them off. We want you to share them. We want you to help us get them out there. But on top of those quick hits, we want to do these big campaigns, which, as we say, we want them to land like meteors on the planet and really fundamentally change things, or else that's the standard we have. Now, we may fail at that, but I like shooting for big achievement. And if you fail, you fail. I'd rather do that than be too unambitious. So this first campaign, and you and your podcast are kind of part of our launch of this first big campaign. What about the 1 hour city conspiracy? And we want it to resonate. So look for op-ed pieces, look for posting, look for media and social media, earned media, interviews, etc., because we want it to land big, and then we want the ripple effects to go out.
I mean, it would be nice if we could have some communications that would actually get shared by real people and not just a bunch of bots that were bought by some oil billionaires' lackeys. Yeah, that would be very nice. Yeah, it has bugged me. I never really talked about the 15-minute city conspiracy or any of those stupid conspiracies on Not Just Bikes because I didn't think they were really almost worthy of my time, to be honest. Like, they hadn't put any thought into why the plan in Oxford was actually bad. And that was one of the things that annoyed me is people would be like, oh, well, Oxford shouldn't have done that. Or if they hadn't done this, it wouldn't have been fine. It had nothing to do with that. It was just the shotgun approach that stuck. But it is frustrating because it really annoyed me when people would say, like, oh, they're trying to track you on public transit. They're trying to know where you're going. And I'm like, so you're in favor of the alternative where you literally need like a driver's license that has your photo, all your information on it, that's stored in a government database, driving a car that has a license plate that is linked to you and all of your personal information that can be tracked with cameras. And you have to put fuel in it constantly, now nonstop, that's owned by a bunch of billionaires. Really? Like, that's the solution you have to this? I mean, it's so obviously incredibly stupid that I don't even know where to start with the whole thing. And so it's one of the reasons why I've focused more on just putting my own messages out there. And ultimately, I mean, from the Not Just Bikes angle, everything was from my experiences. It was a lot less data driven than some of the other urban planning channels were. And it's more about experiences because, in my opinion, if you've done all the right things, but the city's still shit to be there, then you failed. So anyway, I completely agree with that approach of just let's pick something good that we want to happen. Let's pick something bad that we want not to happen and focus on that as opposed to whatever stupid shit the conspiracy people came up with. Because again, they're just trying 100 different things and seeing what sticks. They don't have any beliefs. They don't have any like actual things they care about, except that they want these wealthy people to keep staying wealthy.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think there's one thing that us in this community that we forget, and I think Brent is excellent at bringing to the table, is that for us that we know about this stuff, it's just all stupid. But these things have real impact on policymakers that hold the keys to real change.
Yeah, it's true.
You know, and Brent has really made it clear to me that the 15-minute city in a lot of circles has become like kryptonite. Or not kryptonite, sorry. Yeah, kryptonite. It's like uranium. You can't touch it if you're a policymaker. And that's terrible. So we have to find a way to help not only other urbanists out there, but the policymakers themselves to be able to frame stuff in ways to get past that kryptonite barrier. And we've got something very much today happening. I don't know if you guys know Zach Polanski, this Green Party candidate in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, he's like the most refreshing, optimistic thing I've seen out of UK politics in a long time.
Absolutely. And yet, if you were to Google him today and his 55 mile per hour speed limit reduction proposal, you would get only hit pieces on him.
Right.
You go to Google News and you will just see hit pieces. This reduction to 55 miles per hour is excellent. It'll save tons of lives. It'll improve air pollution. It'll make our cities better. And yet, there's nobody out there helping this awesome, seemingly awesome person to get past all of that. So we're hoping that, I don't know, we haven't talked internally on if we're going to get involved in that or not. But that's the kind of thing where we need more urbanists and more allies working to communicate these kinds of issues better.
Yeah.
Well, we've got to acknowledge that these things work. The reason why they throw it at the wall and see what sticks is because it works. And whatever sticks, they count on the fact that regular media is looking for controversy. Oh, there's some. I'll report on that like it's legitimate. And it happens a lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a couple of problems with it. They have an awful lot of money, so they can afford to do 100 things and see what sticks, whereas the rest of us have to pick and choose. They also have a media that's generally corporate controlled and in favor of this kind of thing, especially in the UK. The UK media is actually pretty, like, fucking awful, to be honest. I live there, and it is trash. It's not as bad as the United States, but it's pretty bad. And so it is very, very hard to get a, let's say, non-incredibly right-wing corporate message through that machine of corporate UK media. And I think social media is the only thing that lets that be possible. Now, you know, there are people trying to control that as well, but it is not as controlled as corporate-owned media.
But that's why we want to turn the heads on the conspiracy. Because I'll tell you, what Grant's talking about with the 15-minute city and city halls is this. There are people that just describe that, oh, that's that thing where the tinfoil hat people are picketing. No, that's the thing where incredibly wealthy interests are targeting a good idea because it became popular.
Yeah.
Because a very high-profile mayor, Anne Hidalgo in Paris, made it famous,
Yeah.
And as soon as it became popular and other mayors were talking about it, it became a target. So it ain't the tinfoil hat guy out on the street corner. It's big money doing powerful things through corporate media, et cetera, Jason.
Yeah.
And the example that Grant's talking about is, I get frustrated when I've heard city planners or people say, oh, that conspiracy theory about the 15-minute city, that died down, right? That's pretty much died down. Well, it died down because it largely succeeded. For every Paris that's out there still talking about it, I could probably point to you 25 mayors or 25 city halls where the comms department, the communication department, the politicians have given the direction. Don't use those words.
Yeah.
They are now off limits. And even words like them, like complete communities and walkable, be careful because we don't want those tinfoil hat people to show up on our corner.
Yeah.
So it's like working the ref, if you know that hockey reference or soccer or football reference. They've worked the ref so much that now we've all given up the words. And, screw that. We're not giving up the words. We're not giving up the contents just because you've tried to scare us away from them because they were successful.
Yeah.
So it's really important to not just recognize they are lies. This whole organization we're creating, this whole movement we're creating is about aggressively and unapologetically pushing back and taking the language back. And even if something's been lost, people might ask, why are we bringing up the 15-minute cities again? Didn't it die down? No, we have to take back the ground that we've lost because to a certain extent, it succeeded.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a very good point, and I hope that you are successful in that because honestly, that's what we need more than anything because there is nothing more frustrating than trying to make cities better and then having it stopped by what are ultimately disinformation campaigns. It's so incredibly frustrating to see because I know from my experience that the vast majority of people would prefer living in a walkable city to one that is car dependent. Even if they don't know it yet, I guarantee you that the vast majority of people will because I've seen it so many times. So, I don't know. I think that's probably a good summary of what you guys are up to. I don't know if there's any last thoughts that you have. I think maybe we'll go around and have everyone give an idea of like what they're trying to achieve here, what the hopeful outcome is, what other people can do to get involved. But honestly, I think it's a great idea. And it's difficult when you don't have, the Heritage Foundation or something bankrolling everything you do. But the one good thing we have is we do have the truth on our side. And we also have the fact that there are people who genuinely care about this, as opposed to people who are just paid to pretend to care about this. And ultimately, it is easier to get people who genuinely care about things to get involved. So I don't know, Brent, if you want to give any last thoughts there.
Well, maybe some pedantic things. It's like that part of the meeting where you point out where the washrooms are in the meeting. Go to our website, explore it. We show all our content. We tell the origin story of the movement and we show who's involved. Take a look at that. We share our mission and our intentions. We're very direct about that. Help us spread it. Jason, you and I have talked about this. Sometimes we as professionals or urbanists think we don't want to be rude or too pushy. But we have to repeat things over and over again because the forces of evil are doing exactly that. And repetition works. And we've got to shamelessly ask people to help us spread our message and spread it as much as possible because campaigns only work when you have eyes on them or ears on them. They only work if they get your attention. So it almost seems crass to want attention on social media sometimes. Why are you so concerned about followers or things like that? But without an audience, we can't change anything. So help us spread that message, get involved, share ideas with us. Maybe you want to join our collective as a collaborator. All of those possibilities are in play. It's not just the three of us. It's a movement that we want to grow and to be always more than the sum of the parts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's fantastic. Any last thoughts on that, Tom?
Not much to add, really just the idea of wanting to kind of highlight some of this absurdity that we've normalized on our streets and for people to kind of see the imbalance that has, just become so normal. And hopefully they can have a moment of clarity in some of the messaging will give them that clarity.
And Grant, what are your thoughts on actually being able to push back against the things you've talked about in your book?
I think we're going to have some good success. I mean, the few times we've seen a really organized effort to do this kind of work, there's been a huge groundswell of support. Transport Alternatives, the Crash Not Accident campaign,
Yep.
which was very, very successful. Most of us probably don't remember, but in the 80s, Mothers Against Drunk Driving really changed the way we all perceive that as an issue. I think there's a lot of room for success when people come together, organize, and really share a common goal. So I think we're going to do some good work, and happy to count on you as an ally, Jason. So thanks.
Absolutely. Anything that makes cities better, to be honest. So thanks so much for coming, guys. This has been a great conversation, and hopefully, we can have a follow-up discussion in the future when we've seen what sticks, what doesn't, what works, what doesn't. And I think that also will be incredibly useful to urbanists everywhere to know what kind of messages do resonate with normies. And I think it'll be a good thing. So thanks so much again for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for listening to the Urbanist Agenda. As usual, all new episodes will be available early on Nebula. So if you're not already a Nebula subscriber, now might be a good time. You can sign up at nebula.tv/agenda. And with a subscription to Nebula, you not only support this podcast, you also get access to content by over 150 creators. That's everything from videos to podcasts to classes and more. Nebula is also constantly adding new Nebula originals, which are high-budget productions on a wide range of interesting topics. If you use our link, which again is nebula.tv/agenda, you'll get a discount on a yearly subscription, which brings it down to only $30 a year. I'm a big fan of Nebula, which is why all of my Not Just Bikes videos are available there, as well as some that are only available on Nebula, and of course, all episodes of the Urbanist Agenda. So if you're not already a Nebula subscriber, go check it out today, and thanks again for listening.